Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. My name is Rachel Henches, and I'm a marketing manager here at Keyed. I want to thank you for joining us and looking forward to going over to how to plan your portfolio like an NFL team. It's almost game time, so let's lay some ground rules. Next slide, please, John. All attendees are in listen-only mode, so feel free to make comments in the chat box on your screen. We are targeting 1 hour for the event, leaving 15 minutes at the end for some Q&A. The slides and the recording will be sent to you following the webinar, so you'll have it available to share with your teammates and review the playbook. If you do have any questions, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A box, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. Let's kick things off with a pre-game poll. Let's find out who everyone has winning the Super Bowl this year. Please take a second to select the team you think will win this year's big game. John, who do you think will be winning it all this year?
You know, I tried to vote actually, and it didn't let me. I'm a Bears fan, so I'm excited. First year in a while, we have much to be excited about.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a few on here that agree with you as well. We've got a few New England Patriots fans out there, Rams and Saints. We've got someone rooting for the 49ers. Unfortunately, I doubt it's their year this year, but
Rams and Saints are pretty good votes.
Yeah, I'd say. We'll share the results here quick. It looks like it's pretty close between the Patriots, Saints, and the Bears. So,
should I share this?
I've got it.
They went away. I had it on the screen for a moment. Can you pull that up again?
Yeah. So now the attendees will be able to see who is everyone voting for.
I don't see it, and I'm wondering how many votes we got for the New Jersey Generals.
New Jersey Generals was 0, unfortunately.
Okay, so who had the most votes?
New England Patriots with they all tied. So New England Patriots, New Orleans Saints, and the Chicago Bears. And someone says go Rams. David's rooting for the Rams in the comments. So.
And David might be the one who gets it right. How about you, Rachel?
I was rooting for the Packers, but they're out of it as well this year, I'm thinking, but still a fan. I'm thinking maybe the Rams too.
Yeah.
All right, next slide. I'm pleased to introduce to you today the presenter and quarterback for this session, John Harrison. John brings more than 15 years of technology and portfolio management experience to his role of VP Operations at Keyed. His experience includes senior roles at HP, Adobe, Workfront, and Keyed, and is PMP certified. John's steel blue eyes earned him the software industry's Sexiest Man Alive honors in 2016. Meet John Harrison. Take it away, John.
Oh boy. Thanks, Rachel. They didn't share that slide with me in advance.
You're welcome.
I have to say, when I first saw a slide that there was going to be slide with my face and that it would say your quarterback, it made me a little apprehensive. The last time I played quarterback, I was sacked more times than I threw a completed pass, and that wasn't just for a game. That was for an entire season. So I was a little worried about that and our content today, but I have had some better football experience since that time that will be relevant today as we get into project portfolio plan. And so over the last few years, as I look back since I've been in the project management industry and working with companies on project portfolio management, as I look back over that time frame, we've coached 3 youth football teams. And in those 3 seasons, we never lost a game. And so I attribute the difference between my experience as a youth playing quarterback and our experience coaching youth teams today entirely to the best practices learned through the Project Management Institute around portfolio management. I think that's clearly been the differentiator for us. And so some of the things that that really connect between football and portfolio planning, as we see as our theme today, is first, it is very important that you keep your eye on the clock in both arenas. You know, in football, if you lose track of time or lose focus for a drive or a quarter, you're going to be in trouble. And you're going to find yourself behind. And when football teams are behind, they start to take more risks and gamble more, and they often make things worse. So we've all seen games where two competitive teams had a very wide margin in the score because one was disciplined, they stuck to their game plan, and they were able to adapt, whereas another one became desperate and started taking excessive risk and took their eye off the clock. So the other thing that we have to always do in project management is ensure that we continue to move the ball downfield and get first downs. We have to ensure that our projects are creating value at a very steady pace in order to meet our objectives on time and before the clock runs out. And then the other very key fact that you see in the good organizations who consistently and predictably produce success is they manage their personnel very well. And so these are some of the parallels that we'll touch on as we go through today's discussion. So here's another poll for us.
How do you measure project success? So of the attendees, is it on time, on budget? Is it on time, on budget, and productive? Or is meeting stakeholder expectations that top project success metric? I'll give everybody a few minutes to vote. John, any instinct on what we might get here?
I'll give them just another moment to not affect
people's opinion.
Not influence any votes, but yeah, I have a vote. As soon as you have some results, I'll make a vote.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say go ahead.
So my vote is meet stakeholder expectations.
Yeah, we had 75% actually say meet stakeholder expectations, and then 25% say on time, on budget, and productive. So exactly what you said there.
Great. Okay, I will not do that again. So some of the key factors to winning the games is that great project management alone is not enough. And that's one of the things we'll talk about today. Very often the challenges that project managers face that constrain the performance of their projects are factors taking place outside of their project, outside of their team, outside of their plan, outside of their schedule. And those are some of the things we'll discuss as we talk about portfolio level planning. So, and in order to manage this and basically mitigate these risks, it's very important to have good, clear, current information on the whole portfolio, the whole league. You need to know what's going on with other teams. You need to understand what's going on with all of your own personnel and just great visibility. A key thing, both in football as well as in project portfolio management, is you have to place special focus on really the battles that are going to win the war. If you try to win every single battle, you're going to become spread too thin. You're not going to have enough capacity, and you're going to overcommit effort to the things that matter less at the expense of things that matter more. We've seen this. We've also seen this with basketball teams. When a few years ago, when the Warriors had their 73-win season, winning more games than any team ever, they also wore down their players, and the injuries accumulated. And they ended up being the winningest team ever in the season, and they also didn't win a title. And it's about pacing yourself and making sure that you win all the key battles that are going to win the war, and and that you manage your personnel well. So it seems easy enough for a PMO or another project management organization we'll just get the right players, we'll plan our plays and our practices, and then we'll just win every game and go to the playoffs, and we'll win a Super Bowl and celebrate a victory. But unfortunately, this isn't as common and predictable as we would like, just because things happen. Things go wrong. You have a star player go down entirely unexpected, and things change, and you have to evaluate. And this happens every year in football, happens in all professional sports, and the teams who can adapt well to the unexpected can continue to achieve success over time, and others have their seasons collapse. We've all seen sports teams that had very high expectations when the season started and never came close to those expectations. And the same thing happens with portfolio planning if we're not prepared to adapt and make necessary changes. So in project management, we refer to it as portfolio level planning, and it needs to be continuous strategic planning. It doesn't just take place once in a time period, because things will happen and we'll need to adjust. In sports, as we look around for teams who do this well, whether we like them or not, I think we're all aware that the Patriots are a team who consistently has proven that they can do this year in and year out. So myself, I'm not necessarily a Patriots fan, but I've gradually become an admirer. And as I was looking into their history in preparation for today, if we go back to 2003, they haven't had a single game that they won less, or a single season that they won less than 10 games. So that's a 16-year time period. And actually, all the way to 2001, they had 1 year in 2002 that they only won 9 games, but they were 9-7. So still a winning record, and probably still a playoff team. So their worst seasons over that whole time frame, they still won about 63% of their games, and overall much better than that. And it's not because they've been, had unique fortune with the health of their team members, or that they haven't had any surprises. They face surprises just like any other team, and they are able to adapt. They have good strategic planning and good management of their personnel, and it allows them to adapt and continue to execute their strategy and move the ball downfield and keep putting points on the board and managing the clock. There have even been times where Tom Brady himself was out, and they continued to succeed with other quarterbacks. And that's really the goal for a project management organization or a program management organization, is to be able to adapt. But for some reason, we don't all do it well. And it's because it's a challenge. Things can become a real tangled ball of yarn in a PMO that has a lot of active projects and a lot of personnel and a lot going on. It becomes confusing. And it's always hard to have current information. It's scattered in different tools and documents and places. And so when something goes wrong, understanding what audibles can be called and what personnel can be moved and used in different places becomes difficult. And in environments like this, even the most skilled and motivated players can have a hard time succeeding because of just factors outside of their control. An example right now in the NFL is, for those who watch the game closely, most are aware of someone we believe to be very talented playing for the Giants, Saquon Barkley, a rookie. And we've seen enough to know he's good, but because the system he's in and the challenges they have, we don't know how good. We don't know if he's just another one of the talents out of a draft who's going to have a few good years and then gradually fade like a lot of other talented players. But we also have seen enough to wonder if he's the next blend of, Marshall Faulk and Barry Sanders or something. But unless the Giants get their system in order or he finds himself in another system, we probably aren't going to know for sure. We probably won't know. And the same thing happens with the project management organization. So, Rachel, here's our next poll.
The next poll question here is, how do you plan projects today? Annually, we have an annual budget and we fit what we can into that. Quarterly, we have high-level goals, and every quarter we plan for those 3 months. Continually, we align our activities to strategic initiatives and reevaluate when anything comes up. Project by project, first in, first out, or something close to that. We're agile and are in a constant state of plan, do, repeat. We don't plan. We'll let people answer a little bit, give them a little bit more time here. But John, any of these stand out to you from the many PMO organizations that you talk to?
Definitely. There's the goal, and then the reality is one that it's similar to a couple of these, but it's that really who has the loudest voice and the most influence to push the hardest for what they want. And on site with an organization recently that the projects that get done always are the ones that the principals demand. and everything else is in flux according to, the capacity and resources that are left after that. But the goal and objective of many is to have a standardized objective method for prioritizing, and then to continually revisit that. What do our scores tell us?
Yeah, our scores tell us, so 35% say annually, 35% say continually, 12% say project by project, 18% say we're agile, and I'm happy to see that 0% say we don't plan. So that's at least a start.
Great. And I would say, actually, the organizations that we've seen do it best, they do have annual planning, but then they continue to revise and revisit throughout the year to see how they're doing and, assess the variances. So great success requires effectiveness at both levels, at the strategic planning level and at the tactical execution level. And we see the same in sports as well. And interestingly, we have our Patriots photo here. I don't know if that's even deliberate, but this was not supposed to be a Patriots themed presentation. So I hope we haven't made people upset on the line that is coming up. But this is an organization that does very well. They have good strategic planning, and then they go out and execute well. And to go back, the example of coaching young kids in football, and we see something we commonly see in professional organizations is they start more projects than they can deliver. They approve more initiatives and put that on the team, an amount that exceeds their capacity. And when they do that, they start to look like a young football team that has too many plays in the playbook, where when you do that to kids, they won't do anything well if they have too many plays. The secret to predictable and consistent success is simplicity and making sure people can execute. There's been quite a bit written on this by the analyst firms over the last couple of years. And, for those who are interested, we'd welcome you to reach out for some recommendations. But Gartner's written a couple articles on capacity planning and how this is really one of the most fundamental practices for really maximizing the value created by an organization. And the reason this is so key, and we see this very abundantly and consistently, that organizations consistently approve and start more work than they actually have the capacity to deliver. And the cost is more than they realize, because, if an organization has capacity to deliver 7 projects and they start 10, by the time they realize they bit off more than they can chew, they can't just kill the 3 they shouldn't have started and deliver the other 7, because they started those 7. So they actually have to kill 5 or 6, and they end up delivering 4 or 5 at the end of the period, and when they could have delivered 7. And it's because they lack the ability to forecast demand on resources, and specifically to do it by role. That's another thing that happens is when organizations cannot see it by role, they look at it and they say, okay, so we do have the capacity in person hours and effort to deliver this. But what they don't realize is that 4 months out, every project is demanding the same skill set at the same time, or the same type of expertise. And so the same resources are in demand everywhere. And the organizations who can see that in advance and plan for it, and there's a couple things they can do to remedy that. They can shift the schedules to reduce that pinch, and they can also just ensure that they have the resource capacity by skill set in order to meet those challenges. So another poll question for everyone. For those on the line today, what are your biggest challenges?
Looks like manual and labor intensive to manage and maintain data, inaccurate and outdated information, no organizational agility, disregard for resource constraints, reactive instead of predictive.
This is going to be interesting, because we see all 5 of these. I couldn't predict.
And I think the poll is going to show pretty much just that, John. It's pretty straight across the board right now. We'll give everybody a few more minutes here, but There is actually one that's kind of taken a lead, so I'll give people a couple seconds and then we'll close the poll and I'll announce the results.
Yeah, this one will be interesting. We see a lot of organizations where it's surprising how labor intensive it is to manage the data, because that's not, it's not really a value creating activity. Well, having the data is, but I guess they contribute too much effort to it, unfortunately, for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of work put in there.
And you see a lot acting on outdated stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty even across the board, around 20% for most, but disregard for resource constraints was the number one here with 40% of the respondents. So that's kind of an interesting one.
It is. And I actually think if we pulled 1,000 people, that would probably be the answer of these five.
Yeah.
That happens very consistently. And that's something we'll talk about a little bit today. So that's interesting feedback. So these are some of the best practices we're going to cover today that we see in organizations that continue to succeed season after season. These are some of those teams that keep working. They're always in the playoffs. A few things they do is they get buy-in from the personnel. And that buy-in is not only, it's a couple areas. It's on which initiatives the organization is pursuing in general, but also buy-in to their project portfolio management methodology and practices, which ties into the second one, which is establishing process. They get the right tools in, and that ties back to some of the challenges that we saw in that previous poll. And they do a good job of anticipating change, which again is something we see from good sports teams and how they're able to adapt to the unexpected. So first thing is just getting buy-in, and I'll share a couple thoughts from what I've seen and a little bit of a customer that we've seen do it exceptionally well recently. Two things I've seen consistently over the years that I've worked in this space is, first, organizations that do a great job of communicating with team members on how their activities are furthering the strategy of the company and helping the company deliver on their mission and vision. Too often you see other organizations where people are working on projects and they really don't know why they're doing what they're doing and what the value or benefit's going to be. And that is not motivating. You don't get near the same performance out of those team members who are just simply showing up, punching the clock, completing some tasks, and logging time on projects. When they understand how it's going to change the business, transform the business, and enable the business to more effectively serve its customers and other constituents, then that's more motivating. And it really not only drives more productivity, but more creativity and effort. And the other thing is voice, is allowing voice and input to flow up from the front lines. There's a concept in the lean management system that became very popular with Toyota that they call the Gemba walk. And this is where managers and executives go down to the front lines where work is completed and where value is created, and they observe what's taking place there before they go back and formulate their ideas for interventions to change the business. And the most important thing that happens there is they get input firsthand from the people who are managing those tools and systems and processes. And while they may not get to talk to everyone, the feedback is accurate so they can make better decisions. But they also now have advocates on the front lines who understand the decision making at the higher levels in the organization, and they can help to evangelize the purpose and intent behind it to help get buy-in from the team. One of our clients that did a really great job rolling this out was Pearson. I'm sure most people on the line are familiar with this organization. They have a massive PMO and massive project management activities in the organization, many projects, many resources, and large projects. And they ran an initiative to really revamp their whole portfolio management methodology and process. And they were incredibly proactive in planning how they would do it. Instead of saying, we're going to buy some software and have some policies and just force them down the organization's throat, they were very methodical in how they strategically planned and prepared the organization to kind of prepare the cultural soil for change and getting input from people, communicating the purpose. And then they had just many activities to ensure they continued to drive successful adoption. One of the first things they were hyper-focused on when they would configure what was our solution, wanted to make sure that the dashboards and views were very tailored to every role and profile in the organization, so that when users went to use our tool, they could get in and get out. They didn't have to spend time learning very much and navigating their way around. They were able to get in and have the information needed to perform their job at their fingertips. And so it was very lean in how these people work. And so they'd go further with that, and they'd take regular input from the front lines, and they would use that to improve their workflows and demo concepts and continue to iterate. And so they'd have weekly workflow sessions where they would gather feedback and look at opportunities to improve workflows, and they would hold office hours for people to come in with questions. And what they did is drive exceptional adoption across a very large user group. And they continue improving with a very steady cadence of continuous improvement. And the ROI in that scenario is substantial. They have real-time data that's right at their fingertips to make decisions and make them more agile, and they can respond to the unexpected and continue to deliver on their goals. So it's very impressive. The other thing that happens when you have good data and people informed is you can reduce the influence of politics. You see an increase in politics when you have a decrease in quality data. When we don't have good visibility on what's really happening, whoever has the strongest influence and the strongest voice is going to win out. But when senior leaders have good insight on the business, reason will overcome politics more consistently, and the right decisions will be made for the organization. So a second key point here, it's related to the experience with Pearson, is process. And we've all seen both ends of the spectrum on process usually. I don't think we have a poll on this one, but over my career, we've seen both. We've seen organizations that are just a mess, and sometimes it's kind of this new theme of management-line organizations, and what it really is a lot of confusion. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we see a level of governance that looks like there's productivity police out there making sure good things don't get done, and that's a problem as well. This is another area where the analysts have produced some great stuff, and for those who are interested, something you may want to look up is Gartner has a concept they call adaptive portfolio investment management. And the concept is around really promoting quick and decisive decision making that is guided with some guiding governing principles. And so they emphasize the importance of building a culture of decisiveness where people are actively involved, to think of your people as people rather than resources, and basically different practices to help them face reality and accountability for results. There's some other good papers out there. Boston Consulting Group has produced some where they talk about these PMOs and other organizations focusing much more on business outcomes than on governance. So there is a need for process. The key is that process should enable greater productivity and effectiveness, though. It should not be a constraint. And we've over the years, we've seen a lot of excessive governance really slowing organizations down. And those are the organizations that are being left in the rearview mirror as other companies innovate more quickly and are more disruptive with their strategic changes. And so we see companies fade away that used to be strong leaders because they have excessive governance. So there's a right balance there. And we see the pendulum swinging back to not as rigid a governance, but good process today. And one of the big things that happens is when you have a problem, the longer it sits without being addressed, it usually becomes costly as time goes by. And so there's typically a correlation between responsiveness and the cost and the impact. So in order to be able to respond quickly, we need metrics. We need real-time data. They need to be the right metrics. And we need to have metrics available that really inform us on value created. And they vary from one organization to another, but one consistent metric for every organization that matters is utilization, and various types of utilization. For those that are billing, it's billable utilization. But whether these resources are billed or not, the optimal management of resources is the shortest list of the key activities that differentiates the best-in-class organizations that consistently win, that consistently produce results, and that consistently get first downs. So the third point, aligning tools. And this goes back to one of the poll questions we had earlier, where we had challenges all across the board. Ignoring resource constraints happens most when organizations don't have good resource visibility, when they don't have the tools to help them forecast resources, and especially to look at it by skill set. That's when resource constraints are ignored. When we see heavy, burdensome reporting processes, it's because it's manual. I've seen plenty of organizations they justified bringing in a PPM tool just simply to reduce the hours spent on gathering reports, putting stuff, in spreadsheets, and then taking it from spreadsheets to PowerPoints. One organization that sticks out, we worked with, this was about 5 years ago. We worked with, it was one of the largest insurance companies here in the US. And they'd made the choice to get a centralized tool where they could manage, prioritization, project management, reporting, and consolidate these things in one central tool. And one of our key contacts there, for him, it was a personal mission to kill all the shared spreadsheets. And I remember when we were talking, he was up to over 40 sheets that he had been able to eliminate by centralizing everything in a centralized real-time solution. Everyone could act on current data. Prior to that, everyone had a different version of the truth, and people were relying on outdated information. And the value gained by that organization was substantial. And so when we really see how organizations are working, unfortunately, it looks something like this. So the idea of tool alignment for many organizations is, it feels like a pipe dream, because there's information. There's a BI tool with something, there's an Agile tool, there's definitely spreadsheets everywhere, requests are managed somewhere, and it's just really confusing. People don't have the information they need to make informed decisions, and it takes too long. It takes too long, where everybody's waiting for the next meeting to get old information. And, when this happens, the PMOs, they start to look like a youth football team that calls a timeout and introduces a new trick play on the spot, right there in the middle of the game. This is one of the most painful things to watch as teams go out, and because it's a game plan, introducing these complicated plays in the middle of a game is a plan for interceptions. And it always happens with young kids. They just, you're going to turn the ball over, and it's going to be costly. And so the organizations who are able to consolidate these things in tools where the data is integrated in one central place gain tremendous value as they're able to centralize their new ideas and prioritize those ideas. They can look at their capacity and compare scenarios to determine which projects they can do when, to ensure they get the best projects done and in a way that will succeed. And then they have all the data there to manage the projects and report on it all in one place. It really drives value creation up while driving stress and uncertainty and risk down. So one organization we've worked with that was incredibly impressive with their results, Risk to Life Sciences. They had a great team that was really struggling with variances in their budget between what they planned to do and what actually happened. And it's because, their tools looked like this previous slide. And after centralizing things in one tool, it was incredibly remarkable. They took a $58 million budget, and at the end of the year, their variance on that budget was within $100,000. So I mean, that's, as a percentage wise, that's incredible. It's far greater success than on a percentage wise than my personal budget. Uh, and we don't see that much. And it's simply because they did a very thorough job of establishing good process and getting everything in one place. And, they emphasize here too that they wanted a solution that would grow with them. And that is a key practice. As you explore ways to improve systems and processes, it's good to get a tool that'll support your current state maturity where you are today, while giving you a path to continue to mature over time. Without continuous improvement, you're continuously declining. If you're not getting better, you are getting worse, unfortunately. And so as you select tools, you need to be very cautious to not just get a tool that will minimally support what you do today. You need a blend of how you're going to mature and move forward, unless you're already at like a level 5 maturity. And maybe someone on the line is, but we really don't see that ever. So a last best practice that we've kind of talked about throughout the discussion is that you have to anticipate change. And, we talked about annual planning, and then you need to be able to anticipate the unexpected and react. Organizations can put a great plan together, but when you get there, and especially on the playing field, you have to make changes. I know this is a football theme, but coincidentally, I have a conversation. I caught up with my dad last night for the first time in a while, and he was talking about a recent boxing match and how really good boxers can make changes between fights. And you see that in rematches. Rematches always favor the more skilled boxer over just a strong fighter. But then the very, very best can actually make adjustments during a match and change their approach. And I'm sure everyone here has heard of Sugar Ray Leonard or Muhammad Ali. Those are some of the people on the shortest list who can do that my dad was talking to me about last night. And it's the same with portfolio management. And it's the same with football. It's interesting we have Drew Brees on here. And teams who adapt and use their personnel, those who have been in the league, one of the more interesting stories with the Saints is they have a player that they use all kinds of different ways. He was a guy whose career kind of ended with injuries, and so he's a very late bloomer in the NFL. For those who have seen Taysom Hill, and if you haven't, I'd encourage you to look at his highlights. He's played quarterback, he's played receiver, he returns kicks, he's on the punt return coverage team, and he's just simply a football player, an athlete. And a lot of PMOs have that player. In fact, it's probably a lot of the people who are on the phone today. They wear different hats, and they adapt and do things differently according to change and what the team needs. And the teams who can do this the best are the teams who have the best visibility, who understand when a player goes down or a project is delayed, they know where they can go to look for alternatives and opportunities. One company we've worked with that did this really well was Thomas Cook. It really came down to insights. They wanted very good data capture and reporting, and they did that. They really cut down the time it took to get their reports together and provide real-time insight to decision makers. And that has provided tremendous value to them. Managers, project managers, and other decision makers know what they need to know in advance, and they're able to respond. And so that's another one of the key metrics. We can't foresee everything that's going to happen. Something that I have seen in my career amongst the very leading performing organizations is those who have an ability to compare scenarios, to do it in annual planning and to do it along the way. And annual planning is just simply saying, how do we create the very best baseline plan that we're going to work on to complete the most high value projects that we can complete with our capacity and deliver? And how do we stagger them and schedule them to manage dependencies across projects and resources, and to really, maximize our risk adjusted return. And it requires scenario modeling. And because you do it to start the year, and then really throughout the year, though, when the unexpected happens, you need to do it again. a lot of organizations are stuck with, once they create that master plan, if something goes off, they don't have the flexibility to look at alternatives. And it is a real, again, another real ball of yarn to try to solve that. And the leading organizations who can evaluate options, and they have analysts or teams that look at scenarios and say, maybe we push this project out, maybe we cancel this one, or we're going to need some new resources before later in the year. And it just gives them an ability to adapt that other organizations lack. With much more flexibility, they can be much more nimble and continue to succeed, and also not be as stressed that they can find options when things happen, because they always do. So just kind of a recap, you need buy-in. Everybody needs to be on the same team. The more people are following the same purpose and working together, the better the results will be. There's the right balance of process that enables productivity and value creation without inhibiting good decision-making and agile changes throughout the organization. Tools that bring it together. That's one of the reasons people are on different pages, is they're looking in different tools and different information that's not current. And change is inevitable. It's going to happen. So, Rachel, question: do I get to share a Keyed-in story now, or of who we are, or are you covering that for us today?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. Well, I should add, I guess, to go back to that last thing of anticipating change. This morning, Rachel, reminded me that one of her teams last year, the Eagles, had to win they had a quarterback having an MVP season and lost him. And they brought in a backup quarterback and still won a Super Bowl. They adapted and changed well. At Keyed-in, we're making our own attempt today. I'm not typically a quarterback for this activity, so I don't know how we did, but we gave it a shot. I like the chance to just give my quick take on the story, because I care about it. This is exciting for us. I've been in this industry for a while, and I work for another leading vendor that's done a lot of good for a lot of companies. And it's a fulfilling thing to help organizations deliver their mission better. And it was exciting to find Keyed-in that are important to do to help these organizations consistently and predictably. So our story starts about 7 years ago. Our founders, the Kloss family, had sold a very successful and so they made the decision to do this again with Keyed-in. And one of the companies they acquired was a project management solution. It actually started over 20 years ago, a company called Atlantic Global, and we still have developers on the product today who have 20 years of domain expertise. And at the time Keyed-in was formed, they were rebuilding that product as a native application. And so it was a couple years ago that I personally met the president of Keyed-in. And as we talked about the areas they were focusing on to deliver value for their customers, I was impressed that he really had the right answers, and to the point that I actually was a little suspicious.
It looks like we lost John, so I'll take it from here. If you give me a moment, I'll pull up some slides. So we will switch over to the poll question, our last poll question of today. It is, are you interested in a personalized demonstration of Keyed-In? John touched on it briefly, but Keyed-In is a PPM software vendor in the space, and we'd love to kind of help you out with some of your PMO needs. So if you would take a minute and fill out this poll question here, and we'll be in touch based on your responses. But wanted to give you guys a quick minute to respond to that. Awesome. Thanks everyone for your input on that. I'm going to check one last time to see if John is still with us. In the meantime, if you do have any questions, please submit them in the question box on the screen, and we will try and attempt to answer them if John gets back on. If not, I will have John follow up directly with those that ask questions. So if you do have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A box. We did just get a question, is this being recorded? Yes, the session is being recorded and will be sent out following the webinar today along with the slides. Great, everyone that asked a question, we will be in contact with you directly. So thank you everyone for joining us today for this webinar. It will be available, like I said, as a recording, so stay tuned for that. Check your email for it tomorrow morning, most likely. But thanks again for everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you on our next webinar. Thanks.